Welcome to Startups Uncensored number 32, a fireside chat with Kara Swisher.
Hello, everybody.
You can sit here.
I've got some good news. We've got Kara Swisher with us here tonight. Let's give you a flavor for the audience. How many of you right now are running or in the next couple months going to start running your own company? All right, so we've got about half the audience. And how many of you are looking to raise money in the next 3 months? And how many of you just work in the tech industry and wanted to hear all the great, amazing things Kara says?
Oh, wow.
And how many of you just showed up for free food?
Excellent.
Not bad, not bad. I like it. All right, so let's jump in. You know, one of the things that I always like to start off with is just let's give the audience a little bit more sense about who you are.
Sure.
Was journalism always a passion of yours, and how did you find your way into tech journalism?
It's a long, convoluted story, which I will not bore you with. But when I was in high school, I worked for the high school newspaper, which is called The Spokesman, I think. I don't remember what it was. And you did stories like the lunchroom is now serving French fries, stuff like that. Controversy over canola oil. But I actually really didn't get into journalism until college, really. I was a yearbook editor and stuff like that, which is a dictatorial position in any high school. But I got...
So you always craved power.
Exactly. So I got into journalism because I went to Georgetown University. I went to the School of Foreign Service, and my intention was to be in the Foreign Service, either in the State Department or in the CIA. A lot of people go into the CIA from the School of Foreign Service, which is a little similar to what journalists do. Analysts are very similar at finding out things. And I found myself working for the school newspaper. And I did really well, like really quickly. I wrote a lot of columns and stuff like that. And the first year I was a freshman, I won this thing called the Bun Award, which was for Father Bun at Georgetown. So I had the best buns, apparently. And I got really, I just got really interested in journalism, writing there from working for the newspaper. And especially because I wrote a lot of columns with a lot of attitude, and it got a lot of reaction, and I liked the reaction. And I was able to sort of, it was almost like blogging. I started doing really personal columns, a lot of things about a variety of topics.
What would you write about?
Oh, how much I wanted to get tattoos, which I later got, and stuff like that. A lot of stuff about how the university was sort of, they had a big fight going on with the gay people of Georgetown University, and then the group, of course, of idiotic men created the straight people of Georgetown University, ha ha ha. And so there was a lawsuit. There was all these great stories. And so I wrote about lots of things, people coming to speak. They had a lot of big speakers coming to Georgetown. And so I was really bitten by the bug very early. It's called the Hoya. And while I was writing for them, I was covering something that the Washington Post covered. I love the Washington Post, too. It was a great, it's still a great newspaper, not like it was, but it really, at the time, Ben Bradley was running it. And I revere the Washington Post. And they wrote a story that I also covered, but the reporter got a lot of things wrong. And it pissed me off. It really angered me. And so I got on the phone and I called the Washington Post, and I got, of all people, the Metro editor, who was Larry Kramer, who's now the head of USA Today and ran CBS Market Watch. And I don't know how I got to him. He was the Metro editor of the whole paper. And I called up and I said, I love the Washington Post, and you're fucking idiots. Like, how could you turn that story in? And it was full of errors, and it was full of mistakes, and how could you do that? I love the Washington Post, and now I don't trust anything in the Washington Post because... And he was like, well, we sent our stupidest reporter to that because it wasn't a big deal. You know what I mean? Like, kind of thing. And so he was funny, but then I kept insulting him and saying I expected more from him, and I got into a big argument with him. And he says, why don't you come down and tell this to my face? And I said, I'm fine, I'll get on a bus. And I got on the M15 bus, and I went down to the Washington Post, which is on L and 15th Street, and I walked in the door, and I kept arguing with him. He said, you're just as obnoxious as I thought you were. And he said, I'll hire you. Why don't I hire you? And so he hired me to be a stringer for the Georgetown University. He was hiring, it was a smart move. He hired college students at every college. There's lots of colleges in the Washington area. And so he hired me to be a stringer, and I wrote a ton of stories for the Washington Post, which then got me into Columbia Journalism School, which I did for a year, and then it led to other things.
So your first piece of professional advice is curse out,
yes.
your potential employer.
Right, exactly.
And be as obnoxious as possible.
You know, it's worked for me over the many years, and it seems to continue to actually, insulting people, it seems to work for me.
And then you went back to grad. You went to grad school, Columbia,
Yes.
for journalism. And then how was it after Washington Post? Did Washington Post give you the credibility to kind of break in?
Well,
early in your career?
I went to Columbia, which was a huge waste of time. Graduate schools of journalism usually are, but I was offered a lot of jobs. So you get a lot of like cachet for going to Columbia. And at the time, they didn't have computers, and of course I was like, why don't you have computers? There's computers. Computers are going to be the future of journalism, And they of course were like, shut the hell up and get in front of the typewriter. But I really wanted to start at the top. That was really kind of my goal. I don't know if you ever see How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. I was like, I'm starting at the top. Like, why not? I like the top. I enjoy the top. I enjoy nice cities. And so I was offered all these jobs in very small towns, a lot of them in Pensacola. Pensacola is not a small town, actually, in journalism, but it was smaller than that kind of things. And I was gay, and I thought, I'm not going to Florida. No way. I'm not going to North Carolina. I'm not going to any of these places. And
Just to clarify, you still are gay.
I continue to be gay.
They didn't switch, right?
No, I didn't, no. I might. I'm open. There's nothing wrong with being straight. So anyway, now that we can marry in 4 whole states, whatever, which is fantastic, actually. So I decided I didn't want to take any of those jobs in those small towns, and I thought it was a personal decision. And so I got a job at the Washington Post again. First I was delivering mail, which is a very big learning experience because you learn who the assholes really are. I mean, really talented people are not the assholes, the untalented people are. That was sort of a lesson. And then I kept working my way up. I worked in the style section as an aide. I did a lot of organizing our celebrity interviews. And I really worked my way up from the bottom of the top, which was a good idea, right? And so I finally got an internship, which was the big deal at the Washington Post, to get one of the summer internships. And
this is after you'd worked there?
After I'd worked there, yeah.
Wow.
And I did a short stint at the McLaughlin Group. I don't know if you all remember that.
Yeah.
I wrote the script. It was scripted. I hate to break your balloon on this situation, but it was supposed to be an unrehearsed talking of the points. It was all rehearsed. And I wrote insults, like on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being nuclear Armageddon and 10 being, that was, his thing.
The greatest was like the old SNL bits about that, right?
Well,
the back Buchanan.
Right, exactly. He was the first sort of Fox News kind of personality.
He was, absolutely.
He really did.
Journalist personality.
So I worked for him, and I thought it was funny kind of in a sitcom kind of way because I'm like very liberal, and he was not. And so it was kind of humorous that I was sort of
I always felt it was kind of hard to figure out his politics, so I felt like...
Well, mostly it was all about his sexual harassment of people. But he actually sexually harassed a woman in the office, and I testified against him in a trial. So that didn't end well for me. But he was like those old...
Not a glowing letter of recommendation.
No, actually, that's not true. He was those old kind of sexual harasser, the chase around the desk kind of sexual harasser, like, you know what I mean? Like, come here, honey, give me a kiss.
You mean the pirate at Disneyland that chases the woman around with a...
So I didn't read about that, but fantastic. I'm taking my kids there soon. Actually, years later, I was the only person who was public about testifying against him. A lot of people at the time, this was pre-Anita Hill, pre a lot of the laws, and there was an article in the Washington Post about it, actually, and I was the only person that would allow my name to be used. Because I thought if you're going to say things about someone like that, you should put your name to it, because nobody then believes it. Like, I don't know who that person was. So if it's like an anonymous source in that case, people don't believe it. And so I put my name to the article saying, this guy's a piggish sexual harasser. Of course, I saw him grab this woman's ass, like kind of thing. And so years later, when I was working at the Washington Post, he actually came up to me, and he's very intelligent. He's a hugely intelligent man, and he used to be a Jesuit priest. He has a very interesting history. And he came up to me at this typical Washington party. He goes, "Hey, Swisher!" And I'm like, oh, good God, it's you again. And he goes, "I just want to say, everybody stabbed me in the back at that time, and you stabbed me in the front, and I appreciate that." And I said, "Anytime, you son of a bitch." And then that was it. That's like, I don't know if he's dead. I think he's dead. Who knows? Anyway, so it was an interesting experience. So I then moved up the chain at the Washington Post, and
you started writing books. You wrote the AOL book.
Well, I was covering retail for the Washington Post, and I wrote a series of big articles about a family called the Haft family, which was pretty famous in Washington. They fought. It was like King Lear. It got me pretty well known in Washington because I wrote a big. They were insane.
Did you write it in iambic pentameter?
I wrote it like a narrative. Yes, but I did. I wrote it like it was drama, like it was Dallas. And so they drove me so crazy. I asked to come off the beat. I was in the business section, which was run by David Ignatius at the time, and it was the backwater. And I just thought business was the most interesting place to go to move. And so I asked to come off the beat, and I was traveling in the former Soviet Union because that was one of my specialties in college, and they called me and they said, "Would you like to cover this tiny little company called AOL? They have about 50 people.
Wow.
This online services, they didn't even call it the internet then, thing is interesting, and this Senator Al Gore is very interested in commercializing this internet thing." You know what I mean? It was like that, and I was like, "Oh, email, you mean?" And so I went back and covered it, and that's where a lot of it started there in Washington. So that's how I.
And then how did All Things D come together? Because how did you and Walt first start working together, and how did the whole online
Well, I had
brand
been
come
the
together?
first internet beat reporter for the Wall Street Journal.
At Boomtown, right?
No,
Or
no,
was
no.
that
I
later?
was the beat reporter. Like,
Oh.
we had one. That was me. You
Oh,
know, there
wow.
weren't that many companies. It was like me, Netscape, and maybe
did you
Amazon.
volunteer for that? You say, "Hey,
No,
I
that's
want
what I
that."
was hired for. I was covering it when I wrote my first book on AOL. I literally was the only person covering the internet. There were very few. I don't think they're around anymore. I mean, John Markoff was doing fantastic work, but it wasn't internet. He did technology.
And were you into technology? I mean,
I
were you
wasn't
a gadget person?
No, I was
Like
into the internet. I was not into the device. Walt, of course, wrote about all that, but I met Walt during the writing of the book because he was the first person to understand the commercial internet's possibilities.
And did you see the writing on the wall? Did you
Yes.
see this internet thing coming? This is
Yes,
going to be
I thought it was
changed?
going to be huge, and I was obsessed with it. And I said, "This is a worldwide communication systems," because it was called the World Wide Web. No one ever called it the web. It was the World Wide Web that you'd have to write out. And so I was just obsessed with the concept that you could publish something and the rest of the world could see it. I thought it was just one of these great moves. No one else was as interested in it as I was, including at the Wall Street Journal when I was hired. I tell the story a lot. I think I was the first internet beat reporter because people were covering Microsoft, people were covering Intel and things like that. And the media reporters were sort of the shit at the Journal at the time, like, "Oh, we covered Time Warner, it's going to go on forever," that kind of thing. And they were like those were the top, like the fancy reporters there, or the ones that you wanted to become. And I remember one of them telling me, "Oh, you're covering CB radio. You know, you get the CB radio beat." Like, that's what they thought of it as. And I was like, the internet's going to decimate your beat. You know what I mean? Like, don't talk to me. You know, and so it was interesting. You know, at the time, I really felt like they didn't understand what would happen. That, you know, one of the reasons I left the Washington Post was because I thought classified advertising was doomed in the new environment. Like, classified advertising is the worst, most anti-consumer thing ever created, and the internet could come and just decimate that, and that was important at the Washington Post. I covered retail for the Washington Post, so I understood what was happening in the retail sector, the closing of all these local stores. And so, you know, I just was very much convinced that this was
And
so
how did All
important.
Things D first come together?
So I was covering the internet for many years and covered all the beginnings of Yahoo and Amazon. I met Jeff Bezos when he had half a dozen people. Google's first funding, I wrote their first funding story for the Journal. So I mean, that was later. Google was much later, but I covered the early Yahoo, you know, Meg Whitman called me before she went to eBay and asked if she should take the job. I mean, that was kind of an interest. I was like, "Yeah, you can make some money." I guess. I think I said that to her. Considering her position on Proposition 8 later, I should have gone, "No, stay at Mattel. It's a great, toys never go out of style." So she's fine. She's whatever. She's water under the bridge. So I was covering all those companies, and I was doing that for a while, and then I got pregnant and had a baby. And while I was away, my partner Megan Smith, who was at the time running Planet Out, which was a big gay site, she was CEO of it, was offered a job at Google in the very early. I think they had maybe 300 or 400
She was
people.
the first head of BD there, right?
It was business development, corporate. It was everything. Yeah. She's. In case you know, the pictures that they take of your house. That you can thank Megan for that. She bought that company.
And she's a genius. I mean, I was reading her background. I mean,
She is.
MIT and.
I'm not a genius. She is indeed. It's like living with MacGyver in a way. She's an MIT graduate. Yes, she's really quite brilliant. She's now at Google X, actually, and they're doing secretive things that she won't tell me. She never
She led
tells
the
me
deal on
anything.
Picasa.
Yeah,
right?
she did Picasa. She bought...
Down here in LA, by the way, mostly.
She bought the one that's the mapping service, Skyhole or Sky, whatever, Keyhole.
Skyfall with James Bond. I
Skyfall.
believe, right?
She bought Skyfall. She green-lighted that picture.
Yeah.
I think it was terrific. No, she bought Keyhole. She bought a lot of the key companies, and then she did business development, and now she's doing whatever they're doing over at Google X. You know, every time she comes home, you know the car and the glasses, but they're doing other things. I know they're up to shit over there because they're crazy, right? So whenever she comes home, I go, "How's the hovercraft?" She's like, "Oh well," and then she like stops herself, and I'm like, "How's the time machine going?" And she's like, "You can't do that. That's not possible." And then she starts explaining. I'm like, "Oh, shut up!" Like, or how's the invisibility cloak going? So yes, so she's a genius. So anyway, she started at Google, and I pointed out to the Journal that I thought Google was going to be really big. Google was not big at this time, actually. It was very early in its history, and that we had to put disclosures everywhere. And so it got a little bit uncomfortable for me because I was covering, I couldn't cover Google very well.
Well, you had like the famous disclosure, right?
Yes,
It's
well,
like,
that's on the All Things D site. But
yeah.
We couldn't do it in the Journal. And so it was sort of set off by a New York Post piece that was on page 6. I don't know if you read it. My pregnancy was announced on page 6 in the J-Lo position. J-Lo's fucking a 12-year-old position. Like, I was there. Sorry, I shouldn't.
Lucky 12-year-old, by the way.
He's 22. Sorry. He's 22. I'm sorry, he's 22. He's perfectly within the bounds of legality. So anyway, so I was in that position and announced my pregnancy in a really awful way, and actually had to tell my mother that I was pregnant because it was like internet, it was something like, it talked about Jeff Bezos and sperm. It was horrible. It was this horrible piece. I saw the writing on the wall.
What's that like at the point where, as a journalist, you now become the story? Like, you're getting well known enough in the space that you're the story. Is that weird?
Yes. Well, it's a kind of irresistible lesbian sperm donor Jeff Bezos. It's kind of, you have to put that up if you're at the New York Post. It's really, and Wall Street Journal, which they hated. Ironically, Rupert Murdoch hated the Wall Street Journal for a long time. So I got why they were interested. I wasn't stupid. Although when the reporter called me to ask who the father was, I said one of Rupert Murdoch's gay sons, and they're married. They're fine. It's whatever. But it was. It's fine to be straight. So, as I said. But yes, it was uncomfortable, and I couldn't put a disclosure in that was, I didn't think there was anything wrong with it if you could fully disclose. Secondly, Megan and I'm literally the only person who's not a gold digger in Silicon Valley. We separated our finances really drastically. I don't inherit anything. Well, you can't as a gay person anyway, very much, without a whole lot of taxes, but we actually moved to separate our money. So I have no benefit, unfortunately, from Google's fantastic stock price, and we split everything half and half. And so I went.
You must get some free lunches when you go there.
I do. Yeah. I eat the free arugula salad grown by the small children in the back, kind of thing. Small, with their delicate hands as they pick it. They're well paid though. Yes, I get free lunches at Google, but not from Megan. She never invites me there. But yes, I wanted to make sure it was clear. And online, I could write this. If you go read my disclosure, it's like 900 pages. We like numb you into submission about how much information you have about us. But we separated our finances. I put the disclosure up, and online I can do that. In the paper,
but All Things D still doesn't exist at this time, right?
No, it didn't. No, once it did, yes. So I stopped writing about the internet because of that, because I felt like there was a really big conflict of interest.
Oh, so how long did you stop writing about the internet for?
About a year.
What year is this now?
I don't remember. Early 2003 or 4.
When did you start writing?
I was writing a book. I was writing the book.
Oh, okay,
so I was away writing the second book about AOL. Okay. But then when I went back, I wanted to do the blog anyway. I was very obsessed with the blog, and the publisher at the Journal at the time didn't know what a blog was, so that was a problem. And so we pushed for doing the blog. Walt and I thought we'd seen these blogs, and we were like, "This is the future."
How did you and Walt get to build that relationship?
Oh, we had been close, right? Because I had interviewed him for my book. He had gotten me to come to the Journal. He was sort of the guy who got me to, because he was obsessed with the internet too, and he didn't think anyone at the Journal was, and I was as obsessed. And he wanted
what was the bit? Did you feel like the Journal was really the gold? Like, what was the difference between the Journal and the Washington Post? And this is obviously News Corp takeover. News Corp's
there's been not a lot of change with News Corp. I mean, I don't deal with them at all, actually. But
we said the biggest change is on the business side, right? Not on the quality.
Again, actually, they're very good business people. So it's not, they've never
Yeah.
been meddlesome. That's never happened.
But just, the Journal versus the Washington Post or any other papers you've been at?
Well, if the Washington Post, if I wanted to go into politics, that would have been the place I would have gone. I was actually offered to cover the White House at one point, and I wanted to shoot myself in the eye with that particular assignment. Why would you want to do that? I mean, it's not like on the West Wing, trust me. And actually, I would have had to cover the whole Monica Lewinsky thing, which would have literally, like, every day. The dress, where was the dress? Oh my God, it's horrible. It's just, you don't want to write that as a person. And so if you wanted to be in politics, it was the right place to be at the time. And I was deeply uninterested in politics, and as it was practiced, political journalism, especially because it was so insidiously, the journalism political nexus was kind of gross to me. And I really was interested in tech. And if you want to be interested in tech, you go to the higher plane on the thing. And the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times had the stronger tech coverage, and the Journal was interested in it. So
what was it like when you and Walt collaborated? What was all Things D was at first, right, wholly owned by the Wall Street Journal?
It is wholly owned by the Wall Street Journal.
It is now. I thought there was some.
There is some. There's some tricky little contract where I make a lot of money. Yes, indeed, but I'm not going to tell you about it.
Okay.
But
is the conference business separate?
No.
That's
it's all owned by by Dow Jones, actually. It's all owned by Dow.
I was reading there's something like you guys are contractors.
Yes, I am. Yes, okay. Yes. I do not work for Dow Jones. I'm a contractor to Dow Jones. Okay. I was an employee for a long time, and then I quit, and then became a contractor.
So you made this pitch.
Not that you care.
You made this pitch to the Wall Street Journal to put up this blog called All Things D.
And they declined. Initially.
And then how did you later on convince them? Just because they saw more tech blogs popping up?
No, yes, that would require the business people in newspapers to be, far-reachingly smart, and which I don't think they've displayed that in any way. I mean, seriously, come on, let's be honest. I mean, it's not the Journal. It's not the Journal. It's all of the newspapers miss this kind of rather large trend, and they. So it was because we did the conference. So we decided to go for the conference business. That was another area we were super interested in because we'd been to so many tech conferences and we're so unsatisfied with them. A lot of sponsors got to be on stage. Mm-hmm. They were either kind of corrupt or aggressively boring, trying their hardest to be as boring. It's a lot of PowerPoints, a lot of panels of 19 white guys on the stage, like, endless. I don't mean to insult you, but that's really what it was. You know what I mean? It really wasn't that interesting. It wasn't a journalism effort. It was more sponsor related. It just wasn't. There were some really good conferences, but there was Agenda, which was fantastic, but it was sort of in its last days. And we looked up to the Agenda conference, for example.
So the idea was to connect the blog and the conference from the very beginning?
Well, no, the conference existed several years before the blog, which was interesting. I mean, we started with the conference in 2002, I guess. And so we started the conference, and from the get-go, the conference was hugely successful because we treated it like a journalism event, and then it made a lot of money because these conferences, if you do them right, they can make a lot of money, and so it created a really good journalism event.
It was it's a $5,000-$6,000 ticket, right? I mean, it's the
well, we're still lower than most, actually, to tell you the truth. That's a ridiculous amount of money, but it's still actually relatively cheap compared to others. But yes, it's expensive. But what we did is one of the things we decided is to go for the very top executives at these companies and really not give them any advance help, that they had to answer tough questions, that they had to tangle with us. And so you were seeing live journalism. That was the concept. And so one of the things that was important was bringing in Steve Jobs, which he never appeared in anything except stuff that he did, except that he organized. He was very seldom did anything that he wasn't fully in control of. And Bill Gates and people like James Cameron or George Lucas or whoever was the person at the time. And we really stuck to that brand. You have to stick to your brand. I mean, it's kind of like any entrepreneur, you have to stick to your brand. And so we were like, we are going to have the biggest names. And if we can't get Bill Gates, we're not taking, at the time, Steve Ballmer. We're taking Bill Gates. You know what I mean? Because he's the CEO. Or if we're offered, I had a big back and forth with Howard Stringer when he was head of US in Sony. He really wanted to appear on stage, and I said, no, we want the head of Sony, not you.
What would you, from your perspective?
He called himself the butler then after that. But he was. I was like, I'm not going to have the head of Microsoft Europe. Like, I'm sure he's a very interesting person, but it's not going to be a D.
What were a couple of your favorite interviews? Now, I won't say best or anything. What were the ones that I got to think that Jobs and
Gates together. I thought that was a fantastic interview.
That was the video that I remember I was watching as I was thinking of starting DocStock, and you just think that, I mean, that literally was one of those things that inspires you to keep going.
Yes, they were amazing, and they had a lot of tension. There was a lot of tension between them, although they also had a great respect and
They did.
I wouldn't say love, but they definitely.
It seemed
was
like camaraderie somehow.
Well, they're for the rest of history.
and Jobs
they're together.
kept needling at
Well,
Gates,
yes,
and
that's the
Gates
whole.
just
It's
kind of laid
it's
back
sort of
and
like a
took
nerdy
it.
kid in school and the needly obnoxious kid in school. You know what I mean? They kind of had that kind of thing going on. And believe me, the green room was worse. It was a little touch and go there. I wasn't sure it was going to happen.
Was there ever an interview that you were nervous to do?
I think that one. I think mostly because the tension between them was because right before Jobs had done a separate interview with Walt on stage, where someone asked him how, why iTunes was the most popular thing on Windows, piece of software on Windows, and Gates wasn't there, but he looked at the Microsoft people and he said, well, if you lived in hell and someone handed you a glass of ice water, you'd be happy too. And he knew, and then he did his little smirk, which he loved to do. And I was sitting backstage with the Microsoft PR person and the Apple PR person, and we were like, oh shit, like, oh no.
But this is also before Apple really became the Apple it was today.
No, he was on his way. Believe me, he was on his way. I mean, it was clear what was going on with iPod. The iPod was.
How many of you in the audience have seen the interview on the All Things D website of Gates and Jobs? If you haven't seen this interview, please do me a favor. When you leave here and go home tonight, tomorrow morning, you can probably just Google it, right?
Yeah, no, it's on. We put up every Jobs interview on iTunes for free, all 9 of them, or 7 or 8 of them. Whatever, it's 9 hours of video of him either by himself or with Gates. I think it was mostly.
So just go to iTunes and search.
Yes, it's there.
All
it's
Things
one of the
D,
most,
Steve Jobs.
Yes, you can download it or just stream it.
Yeah, it is one of the absolutely most captivating tech interviews overall, I think you will ever see.
My favorite part was when I said, what's the thing that people don't know about your relationship? And Jobs goes, well, for years we've been married. And Gates was not expecting this, and he was like, ugh, trying not to be anti-gay, and yet horrified that he just said that, and he doesn't have a great sense of humor. So it was fantastic. That was my favorite moment. But my favorite was his last interview we did with him, when he was close to we didn't know he was going to die, but that last interview was very touching too, the one in 2008, I think.
What about that was special for you? Was it just that it was the last one, or was it?
No, I didn't know it was. I don't think he thought he was. I thought he thought he was going to go on, but he was I just thought he was very thoughtful on the bigger picture stuff in that one, and it was very. He looked very sick, but I think he was. What was amazing is he looked very sick, but he was the most vibrant person at the conference.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was fantastic. Another one that I loved this year was we did Larry Ellison, who was hysterical. Who people forget that how long he's been at it, and since 1978, very few tech executives make it that long and in such a prominent way. So he was hysterically funny, especially talking about how he uses Facebook to meet girls. That was interesting.
How did you find the interview with Mark Zuckerberg?
That was a little controversial, not because of anything we did, but he sweat a lot, so that was bad. He's...
There's the whole hoodie.
Let me just preface, I really like Mark. I think he's a really interesting person, and I think he tries very hard to improve himself. You know what I mean? He's a very young guy, and so I think that was I think he had a panic attack or he had a fever. I'm not sure what happened there. But I don't know what happened, but he was incredibly gracious after it happened. But he just started sweating like a crazy person. Like it was like broadcast news. Remember broadcast news? It was that kind of thing. And Walt was sitting here, and I was sitting next to Zuckerberg, so I could see the whole thing down his back and the whole. So I was like, oh, great, this is not good. And he looked like he was going to faint. That was worrisome to me. Like if he fainted, like I thought I'll do the mouth to mask because Mossberg's not going down there. Like it's going to be, So that's the picture for the rest of my life, for eternity. Swisher gives mouth to mouth resuscitation to Mark Zuckerberg. So I was nervous about that. And he was clearly in a. I don't think it was the questions because he'd answered questions about privacy before. I don't know what happened there. But there were privacy questions, and he for some reason got super nervous and started sweating. And so I kept asking him to take off his hoodie, which he wouldn't do initially, because he just wouldn't do it. And I was like, you really should take off that hoodie, because it's not looking good for you. And then there was I didn't say that, I was thinking that. That was the bubble above my head. But there was one of those things, it's like in a Mission Impossible movie. It was like it was going like this, and then it was getting right here, it was going to do this, that kind of thing. And so I was like, oh, please take off the hoodie. And so when he did, it gave us a chance for me to make a joke. As it turned out, as luck would have it, there was a crazy symbol inside the hoodie. And so I called him the Illuminati and stuff like that. And so what was good is we were given a moment to make a joke about his hoodie so he could calm down. And then the interview was fantastic. He did a great job. He recovered really nicely.
Who who's annoyed you? Who when you're interviewing at the conference just pissed you off for the way that they were handling something?
Carly Fiorina. She never will answer the question asked. That was really irritating. You know, she was running HP and she was quite a PR CEO. You know how those go. You know, a lot of platitudes but not results.
Why would you say that I know how that
No,
goes, Kara?
No, I love DocStock, except when you take down my Yahoo documents. No, I was teasing. I was telling, it's not your fault that their lawyers are douchebags. I'm sorry. That's not a nice thing to say.
Did you, by the way, did you say they're lawyers, just lawyers?
No, I like
douchebags?
lawyers. My brother's
okay.
a lawyer. No, I don't really like lawyers, but I don't dislike lawyers. But to taking that, anyway, ignore me, please. So, what was we talking about?
So Carly, PR CEO,
So
got
she
in
didn't. There was trouble at HP because she was very announcy and not the result. You know, they hadn't kept up in the innovation department, and you know, by that time iPod had come out and stuff like that, and a lot of the stuff that HP could have invented, they didn't, and it was like sort of. But they had great commercials. Remember those commercials where they had the pictures and the photos, but they didn't have results. And so my first question, which was a little probably not the nicest question, I said, "I really like your commercials. I really like your whole PR thing, but can you name one innovative product that has been made under your regime, and you can't count printer features, because a new font is not innovation." So she didn't like that question, so she declined to answer it and answered a whole different question of which I didn't ask. And so she went into a bunch of stuff, and I let her go on for a little bit, and then I said, you know, fascinating answer, but it's not the question I asked. Can you actually answer the question? So she wasn't answering the question, and it irritated me. It went on at several questions, several answers that she wouldn't answer, and then it was almost impossible to get her off. But when she came off stage, she gave me that dagger eye, like. She was out like 3 months later, which is interesting.
How do you draw that line? And overall, I think you do it incredibly well. Where I've always found you just to be one of the most interesting interviewers because you won't let something go. And you just treat somebody either like they're your old friend or acquaintance, maybe because in most cases they are, but you'll needle and prod and poke. How far can you take that line, and then where do you have to stop so that they actually will come back to another conference?
You know, first of all, I think smart people like smart questions. I think that's falsely. I think they do like it. They do. Smart people want to be questioned well, and they don't want to have these asinine platitudinous answers. They don't want to make them. Nobody likes saying nothing and being, except politicians. But you know, I mean, really, they don't. Nobody does, and nobody likes hearing them. And so, to start with that, I think most smart people in tech are smart, and smart ones like smart questions. Secondly, we don't try to be snarky at them. We're not trying to play gotcha. That's kind of a ridiculous game. You know what I mean? You don't win at that game, and it's not interesting.
But you do challenge.
We challenge them.
Challenge
We challenge them in the way
lot.
that we consider them smart people. We start with the premise that they're smart, and we ask questions people want to know, and we want to know because we're interested people. And we also ask questions that will illuminate someone on the good and the bad of the answers. You know what I mean? So they can actually show the genuine person. And I think everyone wants to see the genuine person, and it's very hard to hide from good questions. You can't really fake it for too long when someone's asking you good questions. And so I think that's what we try to be polite and respectful, which I think we are. We've never gotten in any yelling matches with people. It never happens. But at the same time, we press them when they don't answer the question. And I think most people want to be genuine. They don't want to hide behind platitudes. And we keep asking, and if we don't ask, our audience asks. You know, if we ask, we don't go for stuff. You know, it doesn't take long for them to sort of unleash the person they are. Like Ari Emanuel and I had a bet before this year's. He goes, "I'm going to behave this year. There's nothing I'm going to say."
Well, he did until the questions from the audience, and then he.
Not that I got Josh to ask that question at all, but you know what I mean. I won the bet that he was going to blow like a Roman candle, but he.
So Ari Emanuel, for everyone, is a very famous Hollywood agent from Endeavor. He's the character in Entourage that it's based after. And he was speaking at the last.
Yeah, he was calling Google
thing.
criminals. Before that, he did mouth off. He called Google criminal, content thieves, and stuff like that. And then he got in a fight with a reporter. But you know, I think it's boring to the audience when you're asking boring questions. And why be there? What's the point of that?
Who are the tech leaders that you respect most for their business acumen, for their management style, for their vision, for their leadership?
No, different people, different things. I mean, obviously Jobs was really fascinating from a whole bunch of perspectives. As a human being, I think he was very interesting. And the whole arc of his life was so dramatic, right down to his death was really dramatic. And the innovations he wrought were so important, and it influenced everybody.
What do you think of what Andreessen Horowitz is doing? I mean, the way they're just
Smart.
investing so, aggressively into the space.
Well, he wanted to change the VC business, and he certainly is trying to. Both of them actually. Ben is equally.
And
important.
do you think in the long run this is going to be good for?
I don't know. If they make money, I guess so. If they don't, no, not so much. I mean, I'm not a VC, but I mean, it's definitely shaking up the VC world, the way they're behaving. And some people think they're overpaying, and some people think they're very smart in, betting the farm on a certain number of companies and paying up for them. I think they do rather well, and they've had some good exits.
So, with the perspective you have, how do you see the point that we're at now? Some people will say, hey, we're headed into another major bubble, and there's going to be a crash, and get ready for another, like 2008. The way it was when that Sequoia presentation came out. Other people are saying, no, the fundamentals are different.
I think the fundamentals are different. I don't think, what was going on in the early 2000s is just craziness. It was sort of crazyville. Right now, obviously, some of these valuations are kind of silly, and you're seeing what's interesting is that the private markets really paid up for all those companies that went public, and then the public said, I don't think so.
Yes.
So that's the difficulty, is the public market doesn't match with the private market, and that's still happening.
So what's going to happen with Groupon, for example? I mean, Groupon's last $0, on earnings, their earnings per share, right? Zero earnings per share.
And the Facebook troubles and stuff like that.
What's going to become a Groupon in 3, 4, 5 years from now?
I suspect they're going to be sold.
So they'll be taken public again?
No, I think
they'll be taken private again.
I think they'll be sold. I think they'll be sold, or they'll close. I think they're not, unless they come up with something rather dramatic. Every company can revive itself. I just think they have sort of used up investor confidence and enthusiasm for what they're doing. And I think that doesn't mean they can't, it doesn't mean they can't do something. It's just a very difficult way to get back. And I happen to like Andrew a lot, the guy who's the CEO.
Other than Facebook, what are the tech companies that have gone public recently that you say are built to last? That these are going to be, LinkedIn?
None of them, ever. I mean, everything has its season, but
even 5, 10 years out from now, they will still be around.
LinkedIn is interesting. I think they're the quiet one that seems to have been making money, but even their stock is out of line with their revenue. It's just, as much as I have great regard for Reed and Jeff, they're obviously in an area that's very interesting and growing and fast growing, and that whole business is going online, and so someone has to dominate it. But if you look at the PE ratios, they're kind of nuts. I mean, Facebook's is still, I could look them up, but they're still kind of nuts, the PE ratios. What's interesting is the PE ratios for, the price earnings ratios for Google and Apple are quite low still, compared to Facebook. I think is up in the 70s or 80s. I forget when I looked last.
So, do you trade in any tech stocks at all? Can you? It would be a huge disaster.
No, we're not allowed to. No, not a disaster. I probably do rather well, but no, no, I'm not allowed to. I don't own any tech stocks. I don't. They might be in some mutual fund that I don't have control over, but no, we're not allowed to do that. I have quite a lot of probably what would be considered insider information.
Yeah. So let's talk about the evolution of all things D. We were saying right before we came up here, even as recently, I think, as 3-4 years ago, it was you and Walt. I think it was John, right? John was writing, and now you have this team of 10 or 12.
I think it's about 8 or 10.
Is that just because page has gone up, demand, story? What's going on?
We're growing rather rapidly.
And are you personally recruiting the team?
Yes, I run everything all day long. So I have no personal life whatsoever. Yes, we have.
What does Walt do?
He's fantastic. He's the pretty one. I call him the pretty one. No, Walt contributes a lot. We run it together. We run the conferences together, and we make all decisions together. I run.
The two of you have a really good rapport.
We are. He is the best husband a girl could hope for, I have to say, over these many years.
What do you think is the secret to your professional success?
I think that every successful entrepreneurial activity has a partnership involved. If you look at all the big companies, the ones that are the most successful, very few are single people. Even whatever you think about Microsoft, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer were a partnership. Larry and Sergey. There's a lot of really important partnerships. So I think having a strong partner who balances you. Walt and I have different skills.
What would you say are his strengths versus where do you balance each other?
I think I'm a little bit more. I think of crazy ideas, and he tends to tamp them down, but I tend to pull him into crazy ideas. He has much more just very much focusing on the point. I sometimes can go off onto tangents, which is good, but he really does. He drills down to the point. We actually agree on so many. I can't remember the last time we disagreed. It's really kind of interesting. We really know each other very well, and so we know what we want. We have the same. I think it's really important when you're in partnership with people or you're in a business with people to have the same values. And Walt and I have the same values about journalism. We have the same values about how we want to run a company. We have the same values about how we want to treat our employees. We don't often disagree. It's very rare we have a disagreement on something, and it's usually over. He likes oatmeal cookies. I like chocolate chip cookies at D. But it's really small. They're small potatoes, which is good.
And it seems like you have the knack of the dual interview. I mean, that's not always an easy thing to have two people interviewing somebody.
It's hard. We've worked at it over the years. It hasn't always gone, and every interview hasn't been the most perfect one. But what's interesting, it sounds stupid, but when you look at public weather station or not, news stations, there's always the girl and the guy. You know what I mean? Like, I hate to say it, but people like to see, they have the man with the gravitas and the obnoxious lady next to him.
But they're reading off a teleprompter. It's a lot harder when it's just impromptu.
But I think it's nice because people get a different style of interviewing. Walt we have similar interview styles, but it's different, and you get a different kind of thing. And it depends the year. One of us does better than the other, but we really do. We don't do a lot of interviews together as much anymore, but we do the big ones together. But we have a really nice rapport, and so we have different interests too. Walt has a gadget interest. He has more technical interest. I'm more interested in the business and the personalities and the narrative. So it works really well.
So talk about your team, how you built it out, what you looked
for.
So
we started with a very small group of people. It was me, John Pachkowski, and Walt, essentially, and very little money. There actually no money because we funded it from the conference. So we've never gotten any.
You didn't get a budget from.
We did, but it was paid for. We never have gotten any investment from Dow Jones. No, wow. We've handed them a lot of money, but it's not. Because the conference makes a lot of money. So a lot of it. There was a small amount of money to get it started. You know what I mean, to get it started. But mostly it lives on its own. It lives on its own, and it does live on its own actually. And so what we did is we started to look for people we really thought shared our values as journalists, and also embrace the new digital news organization. There's a lot of people who are great reporters at newspapers who never are going to make it in this.
I thought Liz Gaines was a really good pickup.
She's fantastic. And so what I do is I look her. She's actually in Washington right now doing a lot of Google coverage about the antitrust trial. I've sent her there and told her to interview 400 people and get me some stuff.
So for the blog, for the site, do you measure success by You're not running the advertising. Wall Street Journal is selling the advertising.
Yes, the Dow Jones is selling the advertising. Yes,
but
we can't do that.
The way that Michael Arrington was obsessive about page views and traffic and TechMe leaderboard, do you look at that?
Well, we're interested. Who can avoid that kind of thing? We do very well there. I think that one thing I do is I don't show the reporters their traffic numbers ever.
They don't have access to Google Analytics?
They could, I guess, but they can't see what
I know. How their individual posts
how their individual posts are doing.
That's interesting, because at Gawker, they're
yes, they do. They celebrate that.
Yeah, and they bonus you based upon the number.
It makes people be naughty. I just, you know what I mean? Like, people can't resist wanting a number. And so my feeling is.
But can you get away with this because it's part of the journal? If you would start, now you can because of who you are. But if you're starting out and you have to be scrappy, and you don't have the cachet of a journal behind you, don't you have to worry about those kinds of things? I don't think
that All Things Digital succeeded because of the cachet of the journal. I think that All Things Digital succeeded because we wrote great stories and we're accurate. We have a certain premise. One is we're accurate. Guess what? And that's a big deal in tech blogs, let me just say. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds dumb, but one of the things I said was everything, we are not going to make corrections. Everything we write, we have two sources. We know what's happening. We're accurate. Two, one thing we liked about tech blogs was the kind of attitude and the funniness and stuff like that. And I like the journal. I worked for it for years, but there's a certain way you have to write those stories.
Who are the writers not on your team that you respect most?
Lots of people. I look at John Gruber cracks me up. A lot of people lots and lots of people crack me up. Matt Honan from Wired. I love reading his writing. But we wanted to embrace the quickness and the attitude and the personality of tech blogs, and keep the mainstream standards of ethics, which are critically important, meaning the fix is not in at All Things D. Accuracy, which is we know a a lot of tech blogs talk about this process journalism,
Yes.
and it's just all it translated to, we didn't get it right the first time, so we'll make a correction. It's just crap. That's just crap. Nobody wants. I compare
Can you
it to.
explain what process journalism
Process
is?
journalism is you write what you hear, and then if it's wrong, you change it. Really? Like that's called wrong. I don't know. I learned. I'm an old-fashioned lady, but honestly, you don't go to the supermarket and say, "Give me the rancid meat, please," because I would not like the good stuff. You know what I mean? You just don't. You want the best. You want the best. People. We believe firmly that people want the best effort to get it right. That's what you want. You want the best effort from your journalism.
All Things D doesn't really cover startups. I mean,
We just don't have enough staff. We would. We
So is it
certainly
really
would.
just a matter of staff,
cover a lot of
is it,
startups. That's not true. We
is it
do.
that you want to?
We do cover a lot of startups. That's not true. We cover quite a few. Unfortunately, we're doing a lot of fundings of startups, which are the most boring story on the planet. So we're trying to find, that's kind of commodity journalism as far as I'm concerned. But we're trying to find new ways to do that.
What's the best? Let's personalize it for this crowd. How many of you are in some way, shape trying to get press for your company?
Probably
Right?
all of you, right?
And I'm sure some of them came here tonight to pitch you.
Right.
What's the best way that a startup, right,
Right.
not Apple, not Amazon, can find their way to you to ask you and say, hey, is this a story that you want to cover?
We're interested. First, we're not interested in every feature change. Other tech blogs do that. Like, oh, they changed the color of the Uber button. Wow! I was like, I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. We don't cover that. That's not news. It's something. It's information. It's just not news. So number one, we're interested in news, real news, of things that happen. Fundings, we will write about fundings, but I hate them. I hate writing them because I don't think that's
What's
news.
real
It's
news
just
for a
announcements.
startup? I mean, is it that they got their first million customers? Is it they got?
No.
Is it Brian Lee when he gets a huge star for Honest, or for a shoe dazzle like a Kim Kardashian? Is that news?
Sort of. Not really. Of a sort.
So
what I mean?
not Kim, but maybe somebody else.
No, she's interesting. I don't mind her. She's an interesting personality online too, but she certainly gets a lot of press. So what we're interested in is actual news. Something happens. Like we broke the Steve Stanofsky story. Steve Stanofsky is leaving Microsoft.
Yeah, but now again, we're talking about a large Microsoft
yes, but
company.
if something happens at Twitter or one of the more interesting, if something happens at Pinterest right now,
let's make
tiny companies. Okay.
Yeah, they're like.
In the case of tiny
yes.
companies, we're interested in interesting ideas.
Okay.
Primarily. A lot of times they want us to write about their funding or if they add some muckety-muck to the board. I honestly, it really is not that interesting. It's just, we're making these short
What was the last startup you wrote about?
I'm sure, I just wrote about one the other day, and I don't remember,
Okay.
honestly, but we write about a lot of startups. What we're interested in is interesting stories or interesting concepts of those stories. And so we'll write about I'd rather go visit a startup and write about what they do. Liz Gaines writes a lot about startups.
You visit a lot of startups. You'll visit startups.
Yeah.
Like, so you're famous. You'll visit a startup, and you'll take this. You used to take your a little flip cam,
Yes,
right?
and I take videos.
And now you just do the video, right?
Right.
So Carol will go in an office. This is our first meeting.
Right.
I remember you came to our old office. You just pulled out a camera, and you
started
started
asking
recording.
questions.
And you just put me on
Yeah.
camera just like this.
Yeah.
And then you put this up online.
Yes.
And you asked all these questions right there. I remember
Right.
you asked me what my favorite document was.
Right.
I remember thinking afterwards, I should have said, that's like asking me what my favorite child is. Like,
Right.
I can't tell you that.
Yes, you can.
But I wasn't witty enough to say that
You
in the moment
actually can,
then.
but you don't want to.
Yeah. And so how many of these little flip cam interviews have you done?
Oh, dozens and dozens. That's a good way to do it, like talking to people and can you stop doing that, please?
It's unnerving, right?
Yes, and yet you better stop. We're going to knock it out of your hand, that lovely iPhone 5. I think that's the way we like to do it. We like to go see things, interesting concepts, interesting, some interesting person. You don't have to be not at all. Sometimes something that interests me, I'm trying to think of a thing that's just interested me. I'm super busy with this Microsoft stuff right now, but and our conferences. But anything that's unusual or like I went to visit here the one hip swap, and they're in a market that's difficult. They're not maybe not going to make it or not, but the concepts are interesting to me, and so I wrote about the concepts around it, and I did an interview with the person. So I like conceptual stories a lot. I like if you're doing something different in a space. The guy who left MySpace to start, I can't remember what's his name.
Mike Jones, science.
No, I've covered him a number of times.
Yeah.
That was I came here and did a little thing with him because it's interesting how he's doing
Yeah.
it versus people in San Francisco. Now it's kind of big, but I did Frank Adante very early because it was interesting. It was like, okay, you're trying to take on Google. Okay, good luck with that, but why are you doing that kind of thing?
Yeah.
He's actually doing rather well, but anyway, so I try to find interesting concepts there.
What's the best way for a founder, co-founder on an early team? Maybe they're bootstrapping, raise a little seed capital, their first venture round. What's the best way for them to get press?
What do you want the press for? Like, you want to get users? Am I really going to help you get users? I mean, what's
Well,
the point?
I always try to tell founders, like, don't ever try to think that press is going to get you your users.
It's not going to get you at all. That's the whole ridiculous conceit of it all.
But I think one thing that is important is to get that press. I think it's an important thing to show your own team. I think it's an important thing to show potential investors. I think it's important within your already existing sphere of influencers.
I guess.
To kind of keep the momentum.
I think we matter a lot less than you think. I just honestly, the whole kingmaker thing is crap. It's just not true. One person.
But what do you think is the best way people can go about getting? I know that it's on their mind.
Okay, so you have just an interesting concept. Another new way we're doing this, we have this new voices section where people write us.
Do you want to be emailed directly? Do you want to get a PR firm to reach out to you?
Anyway, I don't care. You
Okay.
can send me a carrier pigeon if you want. I don't care how you reach me. But Twitter, people reach me on Twitter a lot, which I happen to like. People know that. But one thing you should realize
and your Twitter's at Kara Swisher.
At Kara Swisher. And I respond a lot. I'm very responsive on Twitter. I happen to like Twitter. But what we do is we have different reporters covering different areas. Liz covers.
Everybody follow at Kara Swisher.
At Kara. You don't have to. Please don't. So lots of people, like John Pachkowski covers a lot of Apple stuff. Peter covers media and advertising. Eric covers enterprise. It's very clear who it should go to from watching us. And so you should try them and CC me, and I'll get to it. It's interesting. Something interests me. If you're an interesting person, we absolutely cover people.
What's going on now? What are the trends? What are the things happening in tech right now that are top of your mind that are most interesting to you?
I think these platform wars that are coming of two things. One, obviously the Google antitrust
Google
trial.
versus Microsoft versus
Google,
Apple, yeah.
Not Microsoft. Google, Amazon, Facebook, even though it's having some troubles, and Apple. I think how those interact with each other is super interesting. Eric Schmidt, we did an interesting interview with him last year on stage, and he called it the Four Horsemen, I guess. He left out Microsoft. What a shock.
And can you talk to everybody for a second what you mean by platforms, just in case?
Well, these are key platforms going forward of what people have to develop off. It's almost like countries. It's like a game of Risk, and you have to sort of pick one of these platforms, and the difficulties of picking these platforms.
Like their mobile operating systems.
Right, exactly. We're super interested in mobile, obviously, like everybody else. I think it's really sort of where the rubber hits the road right now. Years ago, I got in a big fight with Scoble, who I actually love Scoble in a weird way. It's a weird relationship. But we called Web 3.0 mobile. We said everything is going to be mobile, and he argued with us. He said it was something else. I don't remember, like cats or something. So, but we were of the feeling that mobile was with these smartphones. Once the iPhone came out, I think everything changed. And so by mobile, we mean tablets, developing for smartphones. And you can see that in the way a lot of the new, like if you saw, we had the homepage of Yahoo. We showed advanced copy. They did not give it to us, but we showed advanced copies of the Yahoo homepage, and it's a scrolling thing like this. So they're clearly aiming for a more tablet. They're not aiming for a desktop experience.
So let's go through a couple. Let's take a couple companies, and if from your point of view, Yahoo. What does Yahoo need to do to be relevant again, at least within the tech
Well,
community?
they've got the magical CEO now, apparently. So
what is she going to do? Like what
I don't
is
know.
the magical CEO going to do?
She doesn't speak to me, so
Why not?
I don't know. Maybe she doesn't like me. I don't know. She hasn't returned my phone call yet. Neither has PR.
Let's call her now. Do you have her number?
Yes, I do, but I'm not going to call her.
Or not? I can call her on your behalf if you'd like.
No, thank you.
Okay.
No, their PR isn't returning phone calls.
So she's just laying low, trying.
No, they're not returning phone calls.
Oh wow. So
they're not allowed to say no comment right now.
What do you think Yahoo needs to do? If you were running Yahoo, what would you do?
That would be a disaster. Epic proportions. Although Carol Bartz would love it, I think.
Small children in the back growing arugula.
Yeah, arugula.
More small children.
I think just like facing any company, you have to make products that people want to use. I mean, I don't think it's like, that's how we think about things at All Things D. If we don't make a product people want to read or use, what's the point? And so I think that a lot of what Yahoo's done over the years is they've spent a lot of time relying on their giant bunch of people just sailing through there for no good reason but to get email, and they haven't worked on their products. They haven't improved their mail that much. They haven't improved their Flickr. You just look at that and you see what happened there. Like, fantastic product, and then look at what happened. Like, they have all these products that nobody was starting to not use and only use because out of habit. And I think what she has to do there is invest, and she's quite capable of doing this because she's a very product-centric person, is making products people love to use. It's not that difficult, and then figuring out a business plan around it, obviously, but they have lots of opportunities there, to, especially in content. They've always been good at content, and nobody's really good at content on the web, except for Yahoo Finance. They've got some amazing properties there that just have been badly
What do you mean
managed.
nobody's good at content? Well, that's
Well,
a pretty...
no,
well,
I
that's a
don't
pretty-
mean nobody's good as content. I mean, nobody's as good. No one's come up with a Yahoo Finance competitor yet. It's really interesting. They really are quite the best still to this day. And so they have a lot of, nobody's as good as they are at Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Sports. But like this week, what broke down? Fantasy football. Oops. Their most important property, one of them. That can't happen. Like, that's the kind of stuff. It's sort of when Twitter did the fail whale. That can't happen, you know what I mean? And so reliable, innovative, interesting products, I don't think it's that, I mean, it's simple, and
It
yet
seems
it's
like
so
the strategy
complicated.
is simple.
It's simple and so complicated, but one of the things they've done at Yahoo is they've done in 20 other businesses, and I think she's probably much more disciplined, and she's going to pick 3 or 4, and they're going to be really good at them.
Do you think Ross should have been given the shot to keep running, or do you think Marissa was the right choice?
I love Ross. I think he's terrific. I think he's a great content executive, online content executive. And if they had gone in that direction, which Ross's was a much smaller Yahoo. Ross's vision was a much smaller Yahoo.
But profitable. And
Yes, doing very well, but it was a smaller idea than. But I mean, I think you're faced with sort of this superstar Google person. It's hard to resist her vision of making it gigantic. And all power to her if she does it.
Microsoft. What's Microsoft in
Wow, what
5
a mess
years from
there
now?
today, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know. They have their whole new thing is collaboration, which is
What
fascinating.
do you think of Ballmer?
It's literally like the women from Real Housewives of New Jersey deciding to collaborate together. Like that. You're like, really? Now we've gotten rid of Teresa, so now we're going to all get along. But they're not going to get along. You know what I'm saying? They got rid of Teresa today, whatever. Isn't that Teresa, the Guadici, whatever?
I'm not up to date on my Real Housewives.
She's the one that, is crazy.
So they got rid of,
wait,
what's his last name? Steve?
Crazier.
How do you pronounce his last name?
Who?
The
Ballmer?
No.
Sinofsky.
Steve Sinofsky.
Yes.
And he was the head of Windows.
It's a little product
And,
they make.
and the whole idea that you wrote about in your article was that he very much was in control. He's like, everyone stay out. Like, this is my domain, very secretive. And even though he was friends with Gates.
Well, Gates was his mentor.
Got it. They removed him so that it'd be more collaborative.
I think he was difficult for a very long time before they removed him. It was similar to Scott Forstall at Apple.
But where is Microsoft in 5 years? Are they plateauing? I mean, are they just staying steady? Are they going down?
They still have this little business called Windows that tends to do rather well. So, I mean, they certainly aren't in danger of going out of business anytime soon. I think their issue is things are changing so fast for a company like Microsoft. Like, this whole internet thing seems to have caught them unawares, you know what I mean? Like, the whole way people are, he wrote remember the Road Ahead? He did acknowledge the internet like 5 years after it started. But I think that they have not, their business is not an internet business, and they've got to make it into an internet business.
So what do you do if, for example, I mean, how many folks here use Google Docs on some regular basis? That's a lot of people, right?
Oh, yeah.
What do you do if you're Microsoft and there's this great product out on the market called Google Docs?
Well, it's still not quite as robust as the Microsoft.
It's not quite as robust, but you see how many people are using it, right?
It's a whole trend that things are easier in these web-based cloud things, and so they should have.
What does Microsoft do with Office that they charge for,
right?
And how do they not cannibalize that business, but also not become irrelevant with Google Docs out there being free and getting better all the time?
That's why their stock has done this for so long, because no one's figured that out. And I think one of the problems is you have to. There's an expression that Bob Iger used when we were interviewing him at D once, where he was talking about why he was more aggressive on the web than other people putting content on the web. And he says, if someone's going to eat our lunch, it might as well be us. And I thought it was kind of a simple thing to say, but it was a smart thing to say, because I think they've got this juggernaut that they have to pay for, and they've got all these employees, and now you're telling them, you know what, that business that's making all that money, let's forget that. Let's go to this one that makes no money. And so I think it's very easy to sit on the sidelines and say, how could you possibly be so stupid?
What do you think of Ballmer as a CEO?
He's loud. He's a loud man.
How many times have you had him at All Things?
Several times. He's very, very loud. Yes.
Do you find that he?
I think he's fine. He's a very smart person, but he's a salesperson. He's not a technical person.
So why do you think he's had the endorsement? And I mean, doesn't from you sound like the most ringing endorsement. If you're saying he's loud and he's fine.
No, I was just making a joke because he is loud, in fact. But I think that I think every successful
Do you
tech
like
company-
interviewing him?
Yes, I do. He's
You
funny.
do?
He's funny. Yes, because he.
Do you feel like he answers the questions, or is he just kind of
Like when they introduce Bing at D and he goes, Bing, 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 and that's funny. You know what I mean? Like it's a good interview when someone's screaming Bing, Bing, Bing all the time. But, I think that he's a salesperson. And so every important tech company is run by the technical leader. If you're a tech company, you need a technical visionary / leader. And, Amazon, he's competing against Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Larry the robot and Sergey, you know what I mean, over there. And they're the founders. Larry Ellison, he's competing against the founders and the technical founders. All of them are technical founders. Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. I mean, that's difficult. And, without Gates and he were a real partnership, but he was always the junior member of that partnership. And I think it's difficult to run a tech company when you're the salesperson and not a technical, he made fun of the iPod when it came out. He made fun of the iPhone. He made fun of tablets. Like, to take this long to get into the smartphone business, even though it's a very good smartphone, by the way, and it's a very good tablet, is at this late a date really says something about a company's leadership. It says they aren't paying attention to trends that are coming and doing something about them quicker, especially from a position of such power.
Do you like Metro? Have you played around with it?
I do. I think it's good. I like it. I don't need a third phone. I'm happy with the one I've got. You know what I mean? Now there's choices. They had a real opportunity because that Windows Phone is a good phone. It's a great phone. I like it. I think it's a great interface. I think there's problems with it like every other interface, but I think it's a very laudable effort. And look at their efforts in gaming. My kids love their gaming stuff. They're fantastic. They are capable of innovation, and they do a lot of. And Bing actually is a very good, even though it's losing more money than God. It's a fantastic effort. You know what I mean? It's hard to come from that far behind, but it's a fantastic, innovative effort at search. And so, you really have to have someone who's going to. It's a hard situation for them because they're it's almost like being in the sort of the Pony Express business when the train is coming. And you know what I mean? Like it's still a pretty damn good business, but you have to move into the next business. And I don't envy anyone that has to do that, including Google right now. They're going to have to make some changes.
What changes do you think Google's
Well,
going to
look what they did. They went crazy and bought Motorola. They went into Android. They knew what was coming. Smartphones, search on the web was not over, but it was headed in a different. If you look at
you're pretty critical of Google overall.
I am.
I mean, why?
Because Megan pissed me off the other night. Because
I mean, especially when it comes, I think privacy.
Yes.
That's a big deal for you within Google.
I think they do not. They act like they're a little tiny little startup who causes nobody any harm, and they are anything but that. And they have this sort of, believe me, there are fantastic people there. I have great regard for Susan Wojcicki. There's so many fantastic executives there, and so smart. But they literally act like, hey, we're just here to help the world, when they dominate everything. You know what I mean? Like they're dominant in advertising. They're dominant in premium advertising. They're dominant in programmatic advertising. I mean, dominant in 90% in Europe. I mean, and then they're like, oh, we're victims at 90%. And it's sort of irritating. I mean, I did a line that Eric didn't like, although we're talking now, where I said at least Microsoft knew they were thugs, which I thought was fair. You know what I mean? Like, but they act like they're like a star.
Do you think there should?
And then they roll out the little bicycles and
Yeah.
like, aren't we cute? And we're changing the little logo and we're so harmless. And I'm like, you're not harmless. And that's probably what irritates me is they have this vision of themselves of what they are not anymore. And they should have more. I mean, right now what's going on in Washington is like at Google headquarters, they're like, hey, we're going to get over this. And they've got the federal government coming after them. That's not a small thing.
Do you think Google's a monopoly that should be regulated?
I don't know. I would like to see I think it's going to end up with it's going to be difficult. This case, there's no crazy emails, the we're going to kill you emails anywhere. Microsoft sort of walked right into that one. Gates, every third person he said, he was like, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. And we're going to use our monopoly position to kill you, too, by the way. And let me write this down in an email and then record it for you. That was Microsoft. And then he did that ridiculous, I covered the Microsoft trial for the Washington Post. So it was that when he did that testimony where he literally was so petulant and difficult. Larry, I'll be interested to see if they get Larry on the stand, because that's going to be a corker, I think, because he doesn't like people in general, so he doesn't seem to like people in general.
So I know you love using Twitter. Where do you think of it as?
I like Google. I think it's an innovative and interesting company, and there's parts of, I call it good Google and bad Google.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good Google. I miss the good Google, and bad Google sits there quietly, and they should realize their power and stop pretending they're not incredibly powerful, and they have an ability to to really.
What do you
be
make
abusive.
of China block? Is this just like a political posturing thing, China blocking them, and like it'll go back and forth? And
Yeah, I think Google's in the right in China for sure, but there's nothing they can do about it at this moment in time. So they're not going to succeed there.
And then
I admire their stance there, actually.
Twitter. I know you love using the product.
I love Twitter.
The business. What do you think of the business? How they're running the business?
Yeah, I always joke, I shouldn't do this, but Dick Costello is a really funny guy who runs it, who's the CEO now. I always call Twitter a lesbian collective because they never can make decisions. They're always very upset and emotional about, they're like they're the most emotional company you've ever seen. And do you like us? Do you like us? I don't know. What should we do? And they're like, I love them for that. I love their I love visiting them. They're really funny. But I think it's a really fantastically important product. I have no idea how much money they're making. They're not telling. We write about various numbers and stuff, but it seems like it's one of those.
I don't think their ads products are making that much money
I think
yet.
they're not doing that badly. I think they're doing better than people think. But at the same time, how big can it be? I suspect
What
they'll get
number
bought.
would you guess that? Say
I
that.
think we had it at 330 million this year. I think somewhere
300.
in there. Somewhere in there. I think Mike Isaac.
And that's
covers
with all the licensing deals that they do. For
which they don't have as many left, actually, of those. But I think that they are. I think at its pureness, Twitter is a wonderful product. I just think it's a worldwide, again, another worldwide communication system, and I don't know about their business.
Bing, do you use it? Do you think it can rival
I do.
Google?
No. Sort
Why
of
not?
It's because it's like Windows and Apple in the old days. It's really hard.
Do you use it out of curiosity? Do you use it because you actually
it's
like the
good.
service in some
It's
cases?
good. It's just you get used to something.
Yeah.
Good enough is often good enough, unfortunately. And I use Google, and I've used to it, and I'm used to and Google's fantastic. It's not like it's not good. It's gotten kind of spammy lately. I switch among them all. I like Bing a lot. I like a lot of their ability, but Google's been doing a lot of what Bing has been doing. I think Bing has pushed Google to be better, for sure.
Great. Last question I've got for you for now before we open it up. What's it like to be...
Glad that you brought the Google water, by the way.
What's it like to be... I mean, you are a star in your own right. I mean, you're not... I don't know if you've been in the New York Post lately, on competing with J-Lo, but you really are. I mean, you're a star in your own... Is it...
Well,
what's
I'm
it
marrying,
like
I'm marrying Angelina Jolie soon, so...
Yeah. Does she know?
Well, I'm thinking of breaking up Rob Pat now that they're back together or not. Whatever.
But really, what's it like? I mean, you're probably there are probably I don't know any journalists in tech that have more clout than you and Walt, and probably even you more, just because it feels like you're more active day to day.
Don't tell Walt
that. Really, I mean, what's that like? I mean,
well, that's a ridiculous question.
I mean, do you feel like, all right, I'm gonna...
What's that like? Oh, it's fantastic. I get so many. What do you? I mean, I find it to be a great responsibility to get things right. That's really. I think making journalists stars is ridiculous. We really do not matter. What matters is the entrepreneur.
Do you get lobbied a lot by CEOs?
Yes.
Just like, what are they lobbying you about? Cover the story this way, take this angle?
Honestly, in most of journalism, I'm amazed at the things people tell me. I'm always like, really, you're telling me that? And I always go back to the idea, I always think that some people didn't get loved, didn't get hugged enough as children, and therefore they have to tell me things. I mean, I kind of try to figure out why they tell me things in some cases, but I don't think the journalist matters as much as people in the tech industry thinks it does. We're facilitators and we keep people honest, and that's where we serve a great purpose. When Facebook or Twitter or Google or Microsoft is shoveling a line of shit,
but
we can say no.
When you're friends with this many people and this well known, is it hard to get scoops?
I'm not friends with them.
All right, when you're this well known by that, I mean, is it hard to get the scoop, or does your position make it easier for you?
No, the reason someone was asking me about our scoop getting kind of stuff and what we do. The reason we get scoops is not because people are scared of me and must tell me everything when I call. They don't go, oh, Kara, let me tell you, it's Kara Swisher. Thank God, I'm here to give you, here's the documents. I think the reason they do it is because I call more people than other people. I meet more people than other people. I read more than other people. It's an old, I work harder than other people. It sounds stupid, but I think any reporter can do what I do. I sent Liz to Washington, and she actually called me because we talked about it, and I said, here are 45 people you will get interviews with. And guess what? When that trial starts, or if it starts, they're going to call you because you met them in person. Very few journalists do the basic block and tackling of journalism, which is make relationships, become trusted, do a good job, try to get it right. Everyone's sort of in this smash and grab mode of not knowing what they're talking about. And I think it's not magic. It's not magic what I do, and it's not because I'm Kara Swisher that they tell me. It's because when the thing Steve Sinofsky happened, we were on it 3 weeks ago. I called 400 people to find out what was happening. Nobody else was doing that. And so it's not, I hate to say it, but it's not that hard. I'm not doing anything magical. All I'm doing is doing harder, I'm working harder, I'm making more calls, I spend more time, I think harder, I think, than other people. Sometimes I think, what are those crazy kooks at Google up to? Like, you can do that. You can say, what would you do if you were Marissa Mayer right now? And then I think of 10 things, and I check them all out, and one of them is always true. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds dumb, but I do. It's almost like being in the CIA. You're scenario building, and then you go, what could she be buying? What could that tricky Marissa Mayer be buying? And I go, okay, there's 6 mobile companies. I'm going to call every one of them. And I always get a hit, no matter what I do. And so it's really not that thing. And otherwise, what's it like to be me? I have no time. I don't sleep. I have wonderful children. And I try really hard not to be, one of the things that's important at All Things D is none of our reporters, and if they are, you let me know, are rude to anybody. We do not self-aggrandize ourselves. This is from Walt especially too. We do not act like, that we are not, we try to conduct ourselves with respect for the people we're covering, and at the same time asking hard questions with respect. And I think that's one of the things I think we do better. And so you're not going to hear stories of us bullying anybody. You're not going to hear stories of us screaming at anyone. You're not going to, you're not going to see us write endless, how some blog sites write about each other, about they're being mad at each other and all their stuff. You're not going to, when there was that whole thing around TechCrunch when everyone was quitting, that insanity bunch of blogs that went on and on. I had a meeting with my reporters. I said, when you quit, you will not be writing a blog on our blog about how you quit. I said, it's not going to happen. I said, nobody, when Ben Bradley stepped down from the Washington Post, one of the greatest editors in modern journalism, stepped down, there were 5 articles about him, okay? And they were deserved, or something like that. But nobody's going to self-aggrandize themselves at the expense of, we're here to deliver the news and deliver it accurately, and that's our job.
Well, I'm happy to aggrandize you. Tonight, we had Kara, who flew in from San Francisco, is going to have to fly back shortly. And I could not honestly think of a better, more engaging, more honest, awesome guest to have to finish out
thank you very much. Can I say one more thing? Please contact me with really good stories. One thing, we're always really looking. We don't cover LA well enough. I try. I really do try. And I come down here. I love LA. We write a lot about Hollywood and the intersection. But, we do try to get down here and do as much. We have a very small staff. I know we seem rather large, but we're not. But we think it's really important. We think the LA scene is really important. We wish we could have a reporter. I'm hoping to get funding for another reporter who lives down here because I think it's super important to be part of the scene and to interact with people here. But please let me know if there's interesting things you think we don't cover. I can't get to everybody, but it's super, it's interesting. Secondly, one thing I'm doing recently is I'm always looking for fantastic stories. I'm now writing for Vanity Fair along with it. I'm doing some profiles and stuff. So any idea, I love any idea, and I try to respond to as many people as possible. But if you have some interesting idea or something we think we're missing or something we do wrong, we really do welcome criticism. I don't always agree with you. I argue with people sometimes when they tell me different things, but I certainly will listen to any civil argument about things we should do or things we could do better. We are really small, more than you think, and we're sort of punching way beyond our weight. So be patient in that regard, but if there's stuff you think we're missing in general down here, again, we value the LA tech scene. We think it's very exciting. There's some incredible companies down here. And I know it's hard when Silicon Valley seems like such a bunch of snot bags up there that, to be the not Silicon Valley is kind of Silicon Beach, I guess you are. I don't know. But I mean, I understand that sort of the obsessive focus on Silicon Valley, and we should be more open-minded in Austin, New York.
Well, you're pretty large in our book, and we thank you for coming down here
Okay, well, good. So let me
tonight.
know. Thank you.